The Biden administration.
Hunter Biden showed up to the House Oversight Committee's meeting this morning so he would have footage for his upcoming propaganda documentary, the one that's being filmed and produced by his brother. Also, that it could show him as a victim of overzealous Republicans, and it can show his father, the president, committing the one crime that he's ever committed, which is loving his son just too much. That's all he's guilty of, loving his son. Now, this was ahead of a resolution discussion on whether they're going to hold him in contempt of Congress for refusing to comply with the subpoena for a closed-door deposition. 100% the norm, closed-door deposition. 100%. No matter what Democrats tell you, this is normal. This is what they do. This is what Republicans do. Everyone does this for a reason, many reasons, including it's a deposition. You're going to try to find facts. You're not presenting your full case. You're asking questions so you can make the case. And you're doing it in a way that ensures there's not going to be grandstanding for a camera. So Hunter Biden decided to show up unannounced. He did it to cause a stir, and that's precisely what happened. Congresswoman Nancy Mace, the Republican from South Carolina, calls him out. Then Jared Moskowitz, the Democrat congressman from Florida, gets all mad and interrupts like a child.
Who bribed Hunter Biden to be here today? That's my first question. Second question, you are the epitome of white privilege, coming into the Oversight Committee, spitting in our face, ignoring a congressional subpoena to be deposed. What are you afraid of? You have no to come up here and...
Mr. Chairman.
And by the way, as much as I thought that was funny, also inappropriate. You don't need to do that. You don't need to talk like that. She was making reference to male anatomy that comes in pairs. Unless something happens, sometimes it only has one. Why are you giving me that look? Why are you shaming people?
I just think
not everyone has a pair.
It's an oddly specific detail to digress on.
Well, how else do I? There's no context there that would leave someone to know what she just said.
I'm not saying that. I just think bringing up the rare instance where someone would have...
Yeah, well, this is an inclusive show.
Point of inquiry.
Mr. Chairman.
Here's the Moskowitz.
If
the ladies recognize...
If the gentle lady wants to hear from Hunter Biden, we can hear from him right now, Mr. Chairman. Let's take a vote and hear from Hunter Biden. What are you afraid of?
Hold on. Order.
Are women allowed to speak in here or no? Are women allowed to speak in here or no? Because you keep interrupting me.
I'll interrupt the chairman. I don't know that he's a lady.
Well, why don't you ask what his personal pronouns are, jerk? Such incivility. Then our friend Andy Biggs gets involved, the congressman from Arizona. He calls out Moskowitz.
Are we going to continue on with this blatant interruption? This is absurd and inappropriate. I intend to give my statement. I don't intend to have anybody interrupted. I'm not going to interrupt your statements. I think you should have decorum and courtesy and don't act like a bunch of nimrods.
You just interrupted a woman.
And that's 5...
Shut up, you
I got permission.
Can we agree? Everyone has
Mr.
5
Chairman,
minutes. Can we agree?
Point of order again. The assertion that I interrupted was absolutely false. That's typical of the gentleman who spoke it. I got permission to speak from the chairman. I spoke. I was interrupted yet again by the gentleman who doesn't choose to go through the chair and follow proper order. I encourage us, I think if we're going to have any respect at all, we need to have proper decorum.
Well said.
They all come off as babies. I thought he actually came off the best, but they all come off as babies when they do this. It's just childish. It's not a good look. It's just not a good look. Now, at one point, you hear Nancy Mace talk about her, Hunter Biden's white privilege. Got white privilege. That upset Jasmine Crockett, the congresswoman from Texas, who's always upset about issues like this. She pretended to be offended.
Get over the gentle lady from South Carolina talking about white privilege.
She can't get over it.
It was a spit in the face, at least of mine as a black woman, for you to talk about what white privilege looks like, especially from that side of the aisle. And let me quote your now ousted speaker and what he had to say about the Republican Party.
Nah, I don't want to hear that. By the way, why wouldn't someone who's white talk about white privilege? You say we're the ones who benefit from it. We're the ones who experience it. We don't talk to you about what you experience as a black person or a Latino person or whatever.
She was trying to call it out
I know. And the funny thing is, because I hated that comment from Nancy Mace. Unless you're doing it in a very knowing way, you're clearly mocking it, which maybe Nancy Mace was mocking. I didn't pick that up. It wasn't delivered in a way that was clearly mocking. Unless you're doing it that way, stop using that language. Stop legitimizing it, because then you get people like Jasmine Crockett who only feels more empowered to use that silly phrase and silly idea. But at some point, Hunter got bored, or he came down from the high, and he decided to leave right when Marjorie Taylor Greene was speaking.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me, Hunter. Apparently you're afraid of my words.
Whoa. Oh.
I'd like to reclaim my time, Mr. Chairman.
It was not a fun day. None of this was interesting. None of this. I mean, I suppose it's interesting, but none of it was adult. All sides, I thought, came off poorly today. Now, did the Democrats come off slightly more poorly? Yeah, because of the Hunter Biden thing. All he was doing here was getting footage for his documentary. That's it. He didn't need to be there. He wasn't invited to be there. It was a total stunt. Now, he's dragging his feet here because he doesn't want to have to go on record in a way that doesn't allow him to manipulate the media coverage. Because remember, he changed his talking point again. He changed it to, there's no evidence to support my father was financially involved in my business decisions, because it did not happen. That's not what you said first when we started to discuss it. That's not what you first said. He changes his talking points every single time because there's more and more evidence that Republicans are finding or about to find that will catch him in a lie so that they can call him out as a liar. Because James Comer says, the congressman, there's plenty of evidence to support that. And by the way, it's not just about whether or not at the time the vice president made money off of these dealings. It's about influence peddling. It's about those calls that were just so strategically made while you were meeting for dinner or having a meeting in a boardroom with one of your business partners. Your dad just happened to call every time you met with them to talk about the weather, because that's what dads do when they're vice presidents. They call and say, is it going to snow in Seattle? They have those conversations all the time. My favorite part was a question that was asked of Hunter when he left, but was not answered.
I'll answer your question if you be quiet and let me make a statement, okay? What kind of crack do you normally smoke, Mr. Biden?
Did we find out who asked that question? I couldn't find out who said that. Do we know?
I couldn't find it.
I wish they would tell us who's responsible. That was a good question.
It was funny.
Only because, are there different types of crack? I don't understand that. Or like, what is...
I don't want to incriminate myself.
I didn't ask if you were a crackhead.
Well, I feel like if I went further into detail, there would be some assumptions.
Perhaps, but just pretend that we're not going to judge you, because I legitimately don't know the answer to this. I know that there's different types of weed.
Yeah, well, I don't think there's different strains of crack. But I mean, there's different ways, whether it's crack cocaine or
he didn't say ways,
crack.
Right? He said, what kind?
Yeah. I don't know.
Or you're saying when he said what kind, he really meant what type of...
Yeah.
What type of practice do you engage in while doing, allegedly, even though you wrote about it and it's very clear, crack?
Yeah, I think that was the intent. I like how he still addressed him as Mr. Biden. There was some respect there.
Yeah, it was very polite.
Cordial.
You know, sometimes you have to ask the tough questions, but you still got to do it in a polite and civil way.